Good morning. My name is Cindy Knudsen. I'm with Clackamas County Business and Economic Development and want to welcome you to our 6th annual Clackamas Export and Global Trade Summit. So thank you all very much for taking the time to join us this morning. And we are so pleased and excited to have our guest panelists here this morning to share information on resources that are helpful for businesses to export their products and services. All right, with that, I'd like to invite Commissioner Martha Schrader to join us at the podium, or join me at the podium for some welcoming comments.
Welcome this morning to our 6th annual Economic Development Summit here in Clackamas County, dealing with exports. I'm excited that you're here today because we are dedicated in Clackamas County to helping our local businesses, because we are a very pro-business county. And my fellow commissioners and I just want to welcome my colleagues here today. Let's give them a hand. Yay! We have a great commission that is very pro-business, very active, and are continually looking together for ways to generate better economic development for our region. And economic development has always been a key interest of mine, largely because I know that businesses create jobs, they provide jobs for our communities, for our people, and it creates prosperity not only in Clackamas County but throughout the region. So we have taken the step as a county, I think, to have one of the most active economic development divisions in the state of Oregon that actually supports industries throughout the county. I'm proud of this team, which is pursuing an exporting Clackamas County initiative by offering connections to business resources to local companies, partnering with local agencies to develop export strategies in the region, and hosting, for instance, as today, a special educational event. We're attempting to improve collaboration and increase the opportunity for international business relationships. And this fits a number of businesses, from businesses that are newly expanding, just getting into the export game, to established businesses that export to more than 80 countries around the globe. We really want to make sure that all of our businesses have an opportunity, should they want to enter the export market, that we are here with the information and the help they need to get started. Because we recognize the importance of exports, increased production and services creates jobs, both directly and indirectly in the supply chain. And we have a wide range of industries in this county. High tech is becoming an increasingly important sector for us. We want to be forward-facing in an increasingly digital world. Our food processing and production, we are an agricultural county. That is a key component of our local economies. Many of our local food businesses are recognized throughout our state and region for their product quality and excellent business models. And not too long ago, when we had the Department of Agriculture out here and we had folks from the President's Council on Rural Economic Development, we had a meeting that actually opened up export opportunities for our strawberries, our blueberries, our cranberries to China, which added another $260 million to our local economies, not just here in Clackamas and Oregon, but Washington State, as well as Idaho. So there are huge opportunities in that particular sector. And a few more industries that we have here that I think everybody is aware of is professional business services. We are the county that actually legitimized healthcare as an economic engine, advanced manufacturing, media production, nurseries, greenhouses, and wood manufacturing. I'd like to give a shout out to my Commissioner Humbertson. Did I say that right? Yeah. Okay. He is now actually should be have a title called Mr. Cross Laminated Timber, because he is so excited about this that he's been following this, and we got to attend the CLT summit together. So go Ken. We're working in Clackamas County. We're hopeful that our new extension building, for example, will be made out of cross-laminated timber. So we're working on that. And here's the key thing I would like all of you to know. As many of you know, I had an opportunity to travel to China last November as part of Clackamas County's development of our sister entity relationship with Guanyun County. And I'd like to recognize Jin Long, who is here today. He's in the back. Yay! So he's the man, folks. If you would like to get involved in trade missions to China, he arranges these missions. He is actually the executive director of the Oregon-China Sister State Committee, and he is president of the Oregon-China Sister State Relations Council. So they're the folks that actually got us connected directly to China. And I see Jan Kaiser is here this morning, who actually is one of my mentors, who has been in China for a while, and actually is exporting and music programs, and has been doing that for how many years now? 9 years. So we already have companies doing this in many different arenas. And I would encourage everyone, if you're interested in the next, I know, Jen, when is the next trip going to be? October, okay. So he's the fellow to talk to who will help us do that. So let me talk a little bit about Guanyun. Our delegation included representatives from Clackamas County. That was myself and Catherine Grabowski-Johnson, Carlotta Collette from Metro, the state of Oregon, who traveled to meet with representatives and better understand opportunities for trade partnerships. And I was there, first of all, it's a gorgeous country with beautiful people and beautiful children, and I saw with my own eyes the possibilities and the opportunities that we have for mutual collaboration. And our sister entity relationship with Guanyun was made official later that month. The agreement that our two counties signed relays 5 important key points. First, we have agreed to set up a platform for the exchange of enterprises. Second, we're facilitating an open investment environment and have agreed to collaborate on trade, culture, education, science, and technology. Third, we've agreed to promote specific investments in Guanyun County enterprises. Fourth, we've agreed to actively promote the establishment of civil contact and friendly relationships between our residents and Guanyun's residents. And fifth, we've agreed to maintain regular communication related to these economic opportunities. This is a huge deal. I believe we're one of the first counties in the state that is really attempting in a very direct way to take advantage of export opportunities. And please remember that it's more than China. It's other countries. The National Association of Counties plays a significant role in this because they have an international trade group, of which I am a member, that gives us opportunities every time we go to a national conference to network with other countries from Brazil to India to our friends up in Canada. But it is an initiative not only at our local level but at the national level as well to help our businesses export their products overseas. So with that, we look forward to exploring new opportunities for exports of goods and services to new markets. Thank you for being here. Please know that our expectation is, working with you, that Clackamas County businesses can actively increase trade around the globe. And if you'd like to see a beautiful piece of artwork from Guanyun County, come up to the 4th floor of our development, actually not our development, our public services building, and you will see this gorgeous, beautiful silk screen that is now in there, and plus we have this beautiful urn as well that we have on display. So we're going to continue these relationships for a long time to come. Finally, I want to thank my dear friend, our teams here, our economic development team, Cindy and the team, because without them, none of us would be here today. Thank you.
All right, and I'd also like to just take a moment to thank our Public and Government Affairs Department at the county. You may have noticed the cameras that are with us this morning. They graciously offered to videotape our program this morning, so you will all be famous on the government channel. So we will also have the PowerPoints posted from our speakers on our website as well. So feel free to take notes, but know that you can also access it online or on the government channel. So, all right. With that, I would like to welcome our keynote address this morning. It is my pleasure to introduce Scott Goddin, who is the Director of the Portland Office of U.S. Commercial Service. Mr. Goddin became Director of the Portland Office of U.S. Commercial Service in 1997. They're located in the Portland World Trade Center. The office serves as a single point of contact for federal export services offered by the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Small Business Administration, and U.S. Export-Import Bank. The Commercial Service Portland has regional responsibility for both Oregon and Southwest Washington. He has been with the Department of Commerce for over 25 years, managing trade policy development portfolios covering China, Korea, and Taiwan, as well as multilateral negotiations in the World Trade Organization. Please welcome Scott Goddin.
Thank you, Cindy. Good morning, everybody. My remarks are going to sort of pursue the same theme that Commissioner Schrader had undertaken, really in terms of, I'll ask your forgiveness in belaboring a little bit of the obvious in terms of talking about the importance of trade to Oregon, and then bring it home a little bit into identifying how competitive Clackamas County is, and then the resources that you can access to support your companies in international markets. I was talking to Jen Lon earlier, who's a longtime friend, and Commissioner Schrader came over, and I remarked that the last time, and I was unable to attend the Chinese presentation a couple weeks ago, where you talked about the e-commerce platform, where I understand there were over 300 people in attendance. Certainly recognition of Clackamas County's leadership in this area, but that kind of rises Jin Lon to the equivalent, and Commissioner Schrader to the equivalent of a rock star, and makes my presentation today sort of the equivalent of a 70s backup band. So I'll try to keep it short and entertaining, and nobody has to sing along. Forgive me as well. I've been doing this a long time, and I started with presentations on Korea, Taiwan, China, back in the old days when the presentations were dense and full of numbers. My presentation today, I'm kind of reversing the trend. The Chinese, Korean, and Taiwan presentations have gotten full of graphics and really colorful, and my presentation will be dense and full of numbers. But I'll try to hit the high points, if you will, just to walk through a little bit what the importance of trade is to this state. 2016 was a banner year for Oregon exports. It was our strongest year ever. $22 billion in exports. That's up 9% from 2015, third fastest growth rate in the nation. As you may recall, trade got a bad rap in last year's election. So Oregon, continuing its contrarian tendencies, said, you know, if it's going to get a bad rap, we're just going to go the other way. We're going to grow. If anybody follows news at all, does anybody realize the significance of that $22 billion figure? It is apples and oranges, but anybody from the last 24 hours? The revenue figure released by the state economist yesterday estimates that Oregon tax revenues plus lottery at around $22 billion. Again, it's apples and oranges, but order of magnitude in terms of the strength of the economic activity, and this is private sector, and this is goods. This is understated. This is not services. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you add services, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of a $30 billion exporter. all right? We're roughly 21, ranked 21 in the nation in terms of our exports. So we, as you'll hear the phrase, we punch above our weight. Again, apples and oranges, but state unemployment rate was 5.6 in 2015, 4.9 in 2016. The announcement yesterday with that revenue forecast, anybody want to throw out a number? 3.7%. Okay? If you're in the government, you get really nervous because full employment is 4%. Okay, so if our export engine is revving, that means exporting is not core to most of Oregon's activity. If your export engine is revving, the rest of your economy is healthy. Relative job growth in 2016 was concentrated among low and high wage occupations. Middle wage jobs are growing again. They're not on pace that we'd like to see them. I'd like to be a little bit of a wonk for a second. Cindy mentioned I've been doing this a long time, to be polite to myself. 20 years ago, when we were working on, maybe 24 or 5 years ago now, when we were doing NAFTA, the numbers that the Department of Commerce, and keep in mind the Department of Commerce includes the Census Bureau, Bureau of Economic Analysis. So we have the wonks who actually generate these numbers, and they don't do it for political reasons, okay? The guesstimates, and they were back of the envelope, but these were back of the envelope from people you don't want to spend a lot of time with because they're too smart. Back of the envelope was $1 billion in exports equals 20,000 jobs, okay? That number is now, when we talk about the benefits of trade agreements, $1 billion is 5,000 jobs. Now, when we say that, we don't mean that we lost those 15,000 jobs overseas. What we mean is $1 billion of exports is now associated with greater productivity in the economy and greater productivity per worker. So there's a lot of retraining, there's a lot of other things that need to be done in a very complex global economy. But I just want to, that relationship in terms of government numbers reflects the impact of productivity. And when you hear about job loss, it's estimated roughly 90% to automation and that enhanced productivity. So job losses associated with trade need to be taken with a grain of salt, but it's not like in 20 years the government hasn't changed the numbers to reflect that technological reality. Average wages in Oregon 2016 were highest point relative to the 1980s. I haven't seen 2017 figures, but based on some of the numbers in the revenue forecast, I'm sure they're up a little bit. Exporting companies on average pay 20% higher wages, and that employment tends to be more stable because it can be counter-cyclical. If there's a downturn in the US economy, global economies can pick up. Between 2013 and 14, many of the stats that I'm citing will be the latest stats available. 2013, 2014, Oregon, the number of exporters increased close to 130 from 5,950 to over 6,000 exporters. So we are a small company state, and over 80% of those 6,000 exporters, actually close to 90, are small to medium-sized importers. Many of you have heard me speak before. The SBA definition is over 500 employees for an SME. I see any number of economic development colleagues in this room who would love to have over 500, a company of over 500 employees in your community. When I say 90% are SME, small, medium-sized enterprises, based on my experience of 20 years here, I'd say that average employee number is probably under 25. If somebody wants to jump up and dispute that, I'm happy to have that conversation, but it just gives you an impression of the size of companies that we have and the strength of our exporting. Another important fact, though, and I'll get back to this a little bit later, between 2013 and 14, number of importers grew 4%. In many cases, we have companies that are importing intermediate goods, adding them to their product, and then exporting. I will get to saying good things about Clackamas County, but export growth is not just in the Portland metropolitan area, which is the accusation made in this state that, everything's Portland focused. U.S. metropolitan areas are responsible for about 90% of growth. Portland certainly is the engine, but this number of close to 19 billion includes both the Portland metro area, Hillsborough, which equals Intel, which is responsible for about 40% of our total exports, but also Southwest Washington, and that number is somewhere close to $2 billion. Okay, so that's the Portland number. But keep in mind, there are other places in Oregon other than Portland. Albany, Medford, Benton, and Grants Pass were among 60 metros in the nation that had record increases in export growth. When you look at the precision cast parts in Clackamas is one of the most globally competitive companies on earth in structured steel and castings. When you look at the similar types of activity down in Albany, Corvallis, in terms of specialty metals, there's some amazing companies down there. But growth in Albany, $650 million, 10% increase. Eugene, $400 million, a lot of technology down there. Salem and Corvallis at 385, 238 million. Smaller communities, so the impact of this volume of exports for their manufacturers is very important on the one hand. The other hand, keep in mind what I said earlier. Exporting is not a core activity for a lot of Oregon firms. So this volume could be 10% of a company's of a company's activity, could be 30%. But these numbers become more significant when you put them into perspective of what companies are doing. Southern Oregon, Medford, 20%, and Grants Pass, 39% exporting. It's always a frustrating thing with Grants Pass because there's one company down there that manufactures air monitoring equipment, and they're an amazing company. And the Bureau of Census can't tell me what company it is because all of this data is provided by zip code. And of course, the only thing the reporters in Grants Pass want to know are, what company is it? And we both sort of know, but in Grants Pass, this volume of exports in a very highly technology-intensive air monitoring and measurement capacity, again, represents a very significant volume, and for the people that have jobs in that company, they are supporting the local economy. Central Oregon, even in Bend, where you would otherwise go for the beer trail and everything else to ski, $150 million in exports, and a lot of that is pharmaceuticals, which you would not think you would have in Bend, other than what goes into beer. I won't belabor, Congressman Schrader had spoken to the importance of agriculture. Roughly $2 billion in change of Oregon exports are agricultural products. You have heard the difficulties we have around container traffic at the Port of Portland. What doesn't get reported, which needs to, because it needs to be put in perspective. We are one of the largest wheat exporting ports on earth. The value of specialty crops like cherries, blueberries, they are on the jets that fly from PDX to Japan to Asia frozen. They're on there with semiconductors and they're on there with Nike Air soles. So the value, the value of high value agricultural products really gets kind of understated and not really completely understood in terms of what happens here. Clackamas, and these are last year's figures, top 5 agricultural producing counties in Oregon. Production value last year, so this is 2015, 300 million. My guess is the increase in volume of exports and production, probably $350 million. I come from New Jersey, where people didn't realize that they raise corn and tomatoes and cranberries. And I thought that was fairly diversified agriculture, because if you're from New Jersey, that is diversified agriculture. They raise other things, but I won't go into that. When I got here, and I was like, well, what's, Oregon, wheat and potatoes, that's got to be it. And then I realized how diversified the agricultural is. So the types of things that we produce, Christmas trees, hazelnuts, filberts if you're a hazelnut farmer, grass seed, blackberries, boysenberries, peppermint. Certainly filberts, Christmas trees, hazelnuts, they're shipped in final form. When you take, I don't even know how peppermint is produced, a gallon of peppermint oil, that will produce an amazing amount of ice cream, other types of flavoring. So the value of this agricultural export is enhanced immeasurably if it's processed a little bit. And so this gets exported both directly, Christmas trees going to Mexico, as long as we have NAFTA, I'll just leave that there, and peppermint oil going into Beaverton Foods, where it might then be turned into an amazing amount of different types of products and exported. Oregon's location certainly close to Asia, and our reputation for quality of product is very important. Speaks to the success not only of our commodity products, but of our specialty crops as well. An example of the type of partnership of Clackamas County and Oregon firms being represented and supported by the team, and I'll tell you who the team is a little bit later, but Cindy and Catherine from Clackamas County, my colleague Alan Christian, and probably 3 people from the state of Oregon attended, and actually Jim Newton in the back there from Small Business Administration, were down at a food show called Natural Products West in California. There were 70 Oregon companies down there. And at that show in California, where they're selling to a domestic market, we had probably 15 or 20 of my colleagues from overseas leading foreign delegations. So really the purpose of my colleagues and Cindy and Catherine was not only to help promote to domestic consumers of those products, but they essentially were introduced to the world. China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, to buyers there. I won't repeat Bob's Red Mill as a local success story. You know Dave's Killer Bread, everybody is familiar. It's interesting for me, doing this for the last 20 years, to talk about companies that we have in Oregon that people in Oregon don't know that we have. When I used to ask people, who are the 2 Fortune 500 companies that we have in Oregon, and people would say Nike and whatever the other one is. In global metals production, specialty metals production, Precision Castparts is a global leader. I have been to a number of countries overseas where there is a Precision Castparts subsidiary, but their importance to the local economy and the range of things that they do really speak to a manufacturing role in key sectors that gets overlooked in at least Portland-centric development strategies. We have people who bend metal very well, and they're globally recognized for what they do. Precision cast parts, sales exceeding $10 billion. Again, if that revenue figure was $22 billion for the state, $10 billion in global sales is significant. 6 factories in Clackamas County, 3,000 employees. Okay, that is a role, and despite how good we are at things like sustainability and services, we have companies like Precision Cast Parts, we have companies like Blount, which employs 900 just down the road here in Milwaukee and has a global presence. 2015, their sales were $800 million. Again, they've had good years, so those numbers are up, but I couldn't find anything past 2015. And the markets that they're in overseas aren't necessarily the easiest markets to do stuff. I mean, if you're harvesting timber, you're probably using Blount equipment someplace in your production capacity. So this success, this sales, this footprint for us is critical. Another company that nobody's ever heard of, not necessarily on the radar screen, a company called D.W. Fritz in Wilsonville. They're going nuts. I wish I was smart enough to dumb down what they do in individual equipments to be able to explain it to you. The easiest example I can think of, which I think I can tell you without having to kill anybody in the room, is they make the equipment that they then ship. They make certain types of equipment that they ship to Flextronics factories in China that are used to make the iPhone. Okay? Speaks a little bit about global trade, that we make the machines that make the phones that go to China, so they make the phones that we can then buy them. But the other piece of this is that there's a company that used to be called Triquint. They've merged with somebody else, but the technology in their communications chips, pretty high-end stuff out in Hillsboro, those are also in the iPhone. So again, global trade. What I've talked about, and I just talked about 2 of Clackamas's traded sectors. There are many more, but I wanted to give those as examples of how global this county, this neighborhood is in terms of what happens and the access, the resources they can access. But keep in mind, when I said earlier that $22 billion was just manufactured goods exports, services exports are key to this economy. And as you know, the U.S. economy is roughly 70% of our GDP is in services, all right? So it's hard to really consider that in the exporting context, but it is. A German tourist comes to Mount Hood, and the money that they spend is a services export. A Japanese student goes to Lewis and Clark College. The money they spend on tuition is a services export. People who buy Dark Horse Comics licensed comics overseas, or watch a movie based on their characters, pay an admission fee, pay a fee for that book that goes into a royalty payment that comes back into this economy that represents an export of the intellectual property. If you do printed music and you're licensing it in China, as evidently somebody in the room has been doing, you're not getting paid by the piece of paper that it's printed on, because it's not the piece of paper that it's exported. At least I hope you're not. Okay. Right? That is a services export. So again, just some examples of roughly $500 million in education exports based on roughly 15,000 students last year. This is something that we want to keep up. Foreign students studying in the US, there's some nervousness around this. Tourism represents $11 billion export industry. Well, actually, tourism, this is both domestic and foreign, okay? But it is a significant industry in this state, in this county. Mount Hood, other areas to see, right? We want those foreign tourist dollars coming in. And again, that another area of some concern that policy is kind of working through. And if you're a Dark Horse Comics fan, you don't necessarily have to buy all the stuff because they're going nuts overseas. I mean, there's characters, and I grew up on Spider-Man a very long time ago. Dark Horse is churning out characters I haven't heard of, and they license them as movie characters, and it's like, who are these guys? $500 million later, they're successful. We have kind of a usual gang of suspects among our export markets, and they tend to be Intel-led, which is okay, because that can open an awareness of where we are shipping, but it also can be a little bit, it can distort where the market growth is and where companies that are as diversified as those represented in the room, as those represented in the traded sectors in Clackamas County should focus efforts. So China is our largest overseas market. That is probably about 70% tech-led. So, and China is a very challenging market to be in, to succeed in. Working with some of the resources I'll mention later, the introductions Jin Lan can make, the relationships developed based on the mission is critical to succeeding in that market. But it's not hard to actually think about Canada. For most of US exporters, North America, Canada, Mexico are great places to start. And with NAFTA, and I think NAFTA will survive in strong form, they represent good, straightforward markets to be in. That first bullet, North America, the countries that U.S. exporters are most comfortable in: Northern Asia, Japan, Korea, South America, tends to be Mexico, Colombia, Chile, where we have free trade agreements, and Western Europe. I was actually just meeting yesterday with consul generals from Luxembourg and Belgium, and they were very comfortable talking about their products coming here and our products going there, because Oregon products do well in high income, strong industrial economies, and those are represented here in these geographic areas. But also, Oregon firms, like many US firms, are very comfortable doing business where English is spoken. So UK is a comfortable place. Canada, depending if you're not in Quebec, I'm kidding. Canada's a comfortable place to do business. Australia, New Zealand, the Netherlands, where English is spoken widely as well, are just markets that are good places, good targets for the types of things we produce. Again, I've overwalked you anyway, but I'll take you a little further on something called related party trade. And this gets a little bit into some of the issues that are coming up in the presidential election as to problems with free trade agreements that we've negotiated. Roughly 30% of our exports and 50% of consumption imports. Consumption imports are things that you import that go into a a product that you then sell in the domestic market or export. All right, so 30% of our exports go to related parties. So our third largest trading partner is Malaysia. 90% of our exports to Malaysia are Intel products. Our largest import market is Ireland. It's not Guinness. All right, it is a more sophisticated semiconductor. So we export certain types of chips to the Intel fab there. They turn them into more sophisticated integrated circuits and send them back, that then go back into the supply chain. So the importance of the supply chain relationships, and particularly in the case like NAFTA, where we spent 25 years setting those relationships up, are critical to maintaining the success we have. In Clackamas County, Shimadzu is probably a very active intercompany trader, both importing and exporting. Rockwell Collins, I suspect as well, very active in terms of importing product and value add and then exporting. But where are we looking for growth? Where have we seen growth, and where should companies focus efforts? Top 5 markets where we've seen significant growth: 2015-16, Vietnam, 245% increase. I don't even remember arithmetic, but that's pretty serious. Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Israel. For certain types of consumer goods, food products, Israel's probably that stronger market, but growing middle classes in each of these other countries presents significant opportunities. And now I'll stop being a wonk and tell you who the team is. You've met, Cindy Knudsen, Catherine Grabowski-Johnson. It's critical for us when we're working with companies to help them succeed in international markets, to have somebody who knows the neighborhood. I would actually like to call them the neighborhood bartender, but that's impolite. To be able to work with companies to assist them, and people who know where that company is in terms of their growth strategy. Because what we can bring in the door when we come in is a state resource, the state of Oregon, you'll hear from my colleague Dana Shannon soon, federal resources from the Export-Import Bank, from the Small Business Administration, and then market development resources that my agency offers through U.S. Commercial Services offices in embassies and consulates around the world. If I come in to talk to you and I kind of bring a Sears catalog of everything you can order, I want to know that you're committed and able to take advantage of what we're offering. Certainly I want you to know that we're a resource, but it's better if I've worked with Catherine or Cindy, and we have a sense that, yeah, these guys are expanding. They had a very successful domestic year. They're in 2 markets overseas, and they want to move forward. So who the different players are and what they do is up on this slide. You'll hear a little bit more from Dana about what the state will do. And one of the easiest ways to get into exporting is an e-commerce strategy, because if you have a page, you're in an international market. My colleague Alan Christian will speak a little bit to that. But I wanted you to know who we are and kind of where we fit, but it's also no wrong door. If you refer a client to us, we'll find out where they can go. But we're very anxious to work with economic development partners in the community, small business development centers, to assist your clients, assist your companies in being successful. And 2 things just to close. Oregon companies have benefited greatly from SBA program called the State Trade and Export Program. Probably a better name for that acronym, but STEP is how I know it. And Oregon will be submitting a proposal for additional money from the Small Business Administration administered through the state of Oregon that allows companies to get matching grant funds to attend trade shows overseas. You'll hear more from Dana. But again, federal support administered at a local level, so this team. The other federal money that I wanted to flag is from my colleague David Porter at the Economic Development Administration for jurisdictions, so I'll say that state, county, that might be looking to develop a foreign direct investment recruitment strategy, which, as I mentioned on the intercompany trade, is really important on the export-import side. And proposals for that are due, I think, in the next 30 days. So when Clackamas County talks about developing an export strategy, not only is this team fully engaged, and we look forward to working with them, but there are resources that are available beyond just this team. So we look forward to increasing the success that hopefully my presentation has bored you completely with today, because we know how to do this, and we look forward to helping you do it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. So our purpose of the Export Summit has two components to it. One is to set the landscape of what exports are in Clackamas County and what they mean to our community. And the second is to give you some actual tangible tools that you can take away from today's program that can help move your export strategy forward in your business or organization. So with that, our next guest presenter is Dana Edward Shannon, Global Trade Specialist with the Oregon Business Development Department, also known as Business Oregon. Mr. Shannon has over 15 years experience in international export-import business, currently as a Global Trade Specialist for Business Oregon, and previously as International Trade Advisor for the Small Business International Trade Center, Small Business Development Center office. Dana is also adjunct faculty member teaching international business, international marketing, and international trade practice procedures at several Portland area institutions of higher education. He also has private industry experience, and that includes overseas manufacturing and the export and import of textiles and apparel. Domestic management experience for Mr. Shannon has included owning multiple apparel clothing stores and establishing domestic distribution, promotion, and marketing of related apparel products. Dana has numerous trade awards and certificates in international trade, including certification as a Global International Trade Advisor through NASBITE, and an MBA and MS from Marylhurst University, and a BS from Willamette University. Please welcome Dana Shannon.
First off, as a clarification that Scott pointed out to me, I have a number of years in international trade, starting with over 20 years. So just a little correction there that he pointed out to me. My presentation that I'd like to talk about today is focused a little more on what international trade is through our department. I think that what we have to offer through our office on international trade is a great resource to Oregon's business community and throughout the state. On this particular slide, you can see some of the details of what Scott was talking about. But what I wanted to point out was in 1987, again, over 20 years when I started with this, the state of Oregon really moved forward with launching international trade. Governor Vicatia in the early 80s and late 90s was really an innovator in promoting international trade. When Neil Goldschmidt was governor, he again took charge in moving international business forward in Oregon, and the legislature at that time appropriated a little over $1 million into our particular organization. Oregon Business Development Department, I think that was our name back then, to move international business forward. At that particular time, I don't know if you know this, but PGE owned the World Trade Center in downtown Portland. And at that particular time, they purchased the franchise for the World Trade Center in Portland and Seattle. The legislature then appropriated those funds to open an office in the World Trade Center. And the goal was to bring all state agencies associated with international business there. They also recruited a number of international law firms and banking institutions, and then some of the small business development center programs. So that was when we really launched a strong program into international business. At that particular time, we really moved forward with expanding our Japan trade office in Tokyo. Our office that we were putting together in Korea. We had an office in Taiwan and then also in China at that particular time. So again, our business community and our economic development partners really got together to move international business forward. And that really came together in about 1987. And as you see from this chart, from then to where we are now, we've really grown international business and exports in a short period of time. I remember when I started in 1987, we were really excited that our international sales reached $2 billion. So over the years, seeing all this growth is pretty exciting for all of us in international business to see that nice growth in international trade. As Scott pointed out, here's some of the export statistics by countries that we export to. And Asia is still one of our largest export areas for products. In the past few years, we've seen a big growth and swing towards Europe, specifically Germany. And at this particular time, we are now developing some more business development projects in Europe, specifically the UK and Germany. We are now putting together a contract with a company in Germany to help Oregon companies through our office develop market strategies and entry strategies into the European market. We also are focused very heavily on foreign direct investment back into the state of Oregon. So you've probably seen through some of the economic development partners here, our goal in bringing businesses to invest in the state of Oregon and communities. It's a good way to build business growth, but then also bring workable dollars back into the community. And as you know, and Scott pointed out, when you look at Clackamas County, I better put the slide forward, right? Again, these are the major industries that are driving international trade and growth in Clackamas County. One of the things that we've been looking at and doesn't really show up on a lot of statistics, as Scott had mentioned, is the service industry. And there are a lot of companies here that are small, medium-sized companies that are doing their business internationally through e-commerce. And again, those statistics don't always show up on some of the export numbers. We have a number of companies here, especially one here in Oregon City, that designed a small product that nobody really thought would go anyplace, except internationally it really took off because there was a need in the marketplace for that particular product. And this is where some of the services that we provide in our office can really help launch a small company into the international marketplace using the STEP program that Scott pointed out, being able to provide them market research, helping them identify potential buyers and distributors in Europe and other places of the world. So again, the statistics don't include the service, and thanks, Scott, don't include the service industry, and it should be identified as a key export source. Thank you. This is our international team at our office. Sunan Setbunsar handles the environmental side of things. My background is in the outdoor gear, active wear, and apparel industry, and then also in the wood products, which is an interesting combination of a portfolio. So it's pretty diverse. Alexa Byers, who I think a lot of you have met, is coordinates our transportation equipment, and then also aviation and food processing. And as Scott had pointed out, agriculture is one of our largest industries, and we're trying to add value to those particular products on exporting by putting together food processing. As I mentioned, when we put together the World Trade Center concept with the different departments dealing in international with the state, there is a division of the Department of Agriculture that is on the international side, and their office is located in downtown Portland. And that particular office functions very similar to what our office does, except they are specifically focused on agricultural products. And a company that's looking at exporting a processed food can use those particular resources, and for the most part, there's no charge for that. But they will help identify markets for you, but they will also help you get the certification of health of the product to go into those foreign countries, because a lot of those countries have different types of food certification, special packaging handling, a lot of different guidelines related to food quality and safety. And again, this is what the state of Oregon is focused on, is helping companies export their products and helping them add value to their products as much as possible. We work very closely with the Department of Agriculture and use our resources with our foreign trade offices to help move those particular products forward globally. And again, in the Portland area and in Clackamas County, there are small companies that are manufacturing or processing a number of small products that can be sold internationally as a service product. And the presentation or the summit you had a few weeks ago on China, we're seeing through e-commerce a number of these small companies now being able to sell their food products through e-commerce into China. One of the reasons that's taking off is because there's continuity in food quality and processed foods here in Oregon and in the United States. So again, it's important not to underestimate e-commerce. And again, our office and the federal government is working hard to help companies understand the market opportunities for e-commerce for medium and small-sized companies in both the processed food and then other manufactured products. Our team leader is Amanda up here. She didn't like I put that photograph on, but now you'll all know what she looks like. Again, some of the services that we provide is one-on-one counseling with companies. A lot of medium and small-sized companies and even larger companies, because they are so busy in their business, managing their business, doing the manufacturing, trying to find out market research, how to finance particular projects overseas or even domestically, we go out to companies and have one-on-one meetings to help them identify potential market opportunities, and then to address issues related to how to develop those markets, how to do market research, how to put together an export strategy for moving into the international marketplace. And this is where it's important to work with our trade partners, such as the U.S. Department of Commerce, Scott and Alan, about the resources that are out in the community, the different types of market research and also certification that they can provide. When it comes to e-commerce, their assistance in helping you register your business in foreign countries so that when somebody's purchasing a product, it will pull up under that country's URL to help market your particular product. So e-commerce is one of the ways that companies are moving into the international marketplace, that we help them try and develop that strategy through the one-on-one. The other thing that's important about our outreach program to companies is helping them identify not only their strategy, but also putting in place a timeline for developing their international program. because a company moving into the international marketplace needs to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. And typically, you should start planning for at least a year to really get started. We want companies to understand this timeline so they can now allocate funds to the international program. It's really hard for a company to jump into international business without really understanding the risks and the timeline and the dollars that are invested in that. We don't like to see companies at the end of the year find out they don't have enough dollars to go the next step and then pull the plug on all of the work that they've done up to that particular time. You'll find that culturally, if you pull out your international business operations in a country after all the work you've put in, it's really hard to get back into that particular country. And so this is one of the things that we as a team try to instill in everybody who's looking at international, is understanding the time and cost investment for doing international business. The other thing that's important about the services we provide that I don't think a lot of people understand is helping companies develop an export marketing strategy, and then also crafting an export operations manual. And there's a number of companies in Clackamas County that we've all gone out to and helped them understand that. An operations manual is really focused on the mechanics of what it takes to do international business, but puts it into a format so that you have a better understanding of the step-by-step processes and the cost and the timeline for each area of that export strategy. The thing that's also important in that is giving your business colleagues within your department a better understanding of what you're doing, because the logistics department needs to know what the finance department has available dollar-wise in order to set up logistics and distribution. The marketing department needs to know what finance are available to move ahead with some of the marketing plans. But all this really ties in to this understanding so that when a decision is made, there's not really, or hopefully not going to be any errors, that the marketing department made a sale, they didn't understand that the logistics department needed a certain timeline. It's really a cohesive movement of business development through the company when you're looking at international. And again, that I've mentioned, these are some of the critical issues that a company in international business needs to think about as they develop their business strategy. We've discussed this a number of times, that as a company reaches this particular point, they now have a better understanding of what the export price is of their product. We've seen too many times companies who are looking at going international not really understanding the time it takes. They don't understand what the true investment cost is, but they also don't really realize what the export value of their product is. And in a number of cases, I've asked people where they've gotten their export price at, and they've kind of made it up. They've looked at what their market value is here, and they say, oh, well, it's going to cost us about 20% more. Well, maybe they may be over or under, but you really need to know exactly what your export price is so you can see what your competition is like in the foreign country that you're trying to sell to. Because as you're doing your market research, you need to use the tools that we can provide to see what your market opportunity is. And you don't want to underprice your product because it may give a bad image of the quality of your particular product. If you're cheaper than what's going on in that country, you may tarnish your image there. The other thing is, by not knowing your price, you may be overpricing your product and not being able to get market share because of that. The other thing that I've run into is some companies in Oregon and then also nationally may not be taking advantage of the market value of their product overseas. So now they're coming in at a lower price, but they really could be gathering a higher sale value for their product and then missing out on the opportunity for possibly selling and making strategies for, increased economy of scale in selling their product. So again, this is the type of services that we try and provide our Oregon companies in developing their strategies for international business. And I think that over the years, since 1987, when I started in this particular area of work, I've seen a really, really nice progression and development of companies in Oregon really taking advantage of these services and really being able to build a strong foundation for international business. It's not necessarily an extra to their business model anymore. They built it into the core area of their business and their business development model. I think, Alan, you might be able to correct me on this, or Scott, but I think most companies now have seen over the past number of years their international sales jump up to about 45% of their business. Again, that's not every business, but that shows you how international business and putting together a strong foundation, and again, taking advantages of the services that the team here in Oregon can provide you, again, helps build a stronger company, not both domestically and internationally. As I mentioned also a little earlier, is we do have a Japan office. And again, that is an office of the state of Oregon that provides a lot of the market research assistance to help you develop export opportunities in Japan, helping you identify potential distributors, potential buyers. They can help you with the market research. They can help you with navigating logistical issues, clearing customs into that foreign country. One of the things that a lot of people take advantage of who are looking at doing business in Japan is that one-on-one assistance, so that they can now target specifically the people that you need to talk to. They can also help you identify the appropriate trade shows that would benefit you in marketing and gaining market entry into Japan. Again, we also partner very heavily with the U.S. Department of Commerce to help add that extra market research value to your particular program. Market research is one of the most important elements of going into the international marketplace. And our particular team here in the state of Oregon at the federal and state level is to provide you as much resources and information to help you put together a plan. By having all this information in place, we see that you and businesses have a better ability to negotiate business deals and distribution contracts, which a lot of Americans have a tendency to fail in because they don't really know how to negotiate. And you can't negotiate unless you know all the tools and information, such as what your competition is doing, how long it takes to clear custom, how much it costs to do international business, how you're going to finance your transaction, and the elements related to what Jim does with the SBA in helping you finance particular projects internationally can be a negotiation tool, because you now know, okay, if you have to have this many international sales in order to make it workable, how are you going to finance that? And again, if you know how many units you have to sell based on your market research, and you know how much you have to sell that product for, and you know what your finances are like, you now know how to negotiate certain sales and motivate your marketing team to put those sales out with whatever guidelines you need in order to make a profit in business. And that, again, is the information that we try and provide companies in our one-on-one counseling around the state of Oregon. And again, as Scott had mentioned, it's not necessarily just the Portland area. It's throughout rural Oregon, working with the medium and small-sized companies. Scott had mentioned, thank you, Scott. Scott had mentioned that the STEP program is something that we are charged with managing for the state of Oregon. That is a particular program that we applied to the U.S. Department of Commerce for once a year. And in the application, then we're granted a number of dollars to help companies go international. The focus for the state of Oregon is helping companies get overseas to participate in international trade shows, to really see what's going on, to see what their competition is like in those foreign markets, so that they have a better understanding of who their consumer is and who their potential buyers and distributors are. I'd talked about market research. This is part of the STEP program that's absolutely critical. If you go to foreign trade shows and you're doing this work overseas that we're trying to help you with, if you don't invest in the time and the market research to help set up meetings, the trade show may not have a benefit to you. And this is why part of the grant, we allocate some of the funds for market research. We have a consultant that we usually hire at different trade shows to provide a service to companies on finding potential distributors, setting up meetings for them so they can really take advantage of their time there. Those particular services, if they have a fee, can fit into the STEP dollar project. If you're working also in tandem with the U.S. Department of Commerce and there are some expenses for their market research and the work that they're providing for you, again, that can be folded over into your STEP grant. So the STEP grant is working really well for Oregon companies who are looking at getting into international markets cost effectively. And again, this is the type of thing that if we can help offset some of their market research dollars and their trade show dollars, they can leverage those dollars in other areas to help grow their company. And again, it's been a very good program over the past 5+ years in helping our companies get into the international marketplace. E-commerce is a part of that also, and over the years it's really grown and helped Oregon businesses grow. We've been able to provide a service so companies are able to now help design their web page, offset those particular costs, but also get a better understanding of what it takes to do business internationally. And I guess I'm going to have a little competition here. E-commerce for the smaller companies we're finding is really taking off, as we mentioned about China. But some of our outdoor industry companies in Bend, I'll use them as an example. They've been able to use the STEP dollars to be able to participate in a program overseas. They've also been able to use some of those dollars to set up e-commerce solutions to business, which Alan's going to talk about. But one of the things, they've helped identify the new buyer out in the world. And those buyers are buying through e-commerce on their smartphone. And so this particular consumer now and in the future are considered smart shoppers. And again, as a company is going international, from 1987 forward, you're seeing the different styles of selling. And a company has to be aware of where they were, what's going on in the market, what the cycles are. And to be successful now and in the future, understanding e-commerce, the smart shopper, is really important. And again, this is why we try and provide some of the grant programs for companies to go international. And, oh, I guess I better not lean too far forward, right? There's a flyer out on the counter out there which explains how to apply for a STEP grant. It's a very, very easy application process. Like, it's about one page. So feel free to take that particular information, go online, or forward it to any of the companies that you're working with.
Thank you very much, Dana. So in the interest of time, I'm going to make a quick adjustment on the agenda. We did have a Q&A section, but I know our speakers are going to be here for a few minutes after the program, so I think we'll just do one-on-one Q&A with the speakers. Or if you have additional questions that come up, please feel free to send them my way or our team's way, and we can make sure that you get connected to the right resource. So with our final presentation this morning, it is my pleasure to introduce Alan Christian, Senior International Trade Specialist with the Portland office of the U.S. Commercial Service. Since April 1997, Alan has worked at the U.S. Commercial Service Office in Portland, assisting companies in Oregon and Southwest Washington with export business development. Before moving to Portland, Alan worked for over 5 years as an international trade specialist with the U.S. DOC Office of Japan in Washington, D.C., working on U.S.-Japan trade policy issues and assisting U.S. exporters with Japanese market access issues. Alan's educational background includes a bachelor's degree in international relations from the State University of New York at New Paltz. Thank you. And a master's degree in economics from Syracuse University. Please welcome Alan Christian.
Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, and good morning. So we're going to enter into the wild world of international commerce here, and I can tell you that e-commerce and internet marketing will put everyone there. So, as been mentioned earlier, any company that has a website is in the international commerce arena, so to speak. So, question is, to what extent are you going to participate in e-commerce? And so this has been an area that for our U.S. Commercial Service has been increasingly important as more companies say, we want to enter e-commerce, we want to do business-to-business or business-to-consumer sales. We have actually staffed up and developed some really good expertise in this area. So the first thing I want to introduce is our Guide to Global E-commerce. We actually have a separate unit called the E-commerce Innovation Lab, for staff that are really quite skilled and knowledgeable in this area. And importantly, they partner with a number of private sector organizations to really build a depth of information and create a number of webinars and opportunities. So these are some of the things that we're going to, if you look at this guide, there's quite a bit of information into all of these areas. And because of, in the interest of time, this is a 15-minute presentation, so we're going to skim the surface on some of these topical areas here, but I would encourage you to get this guide. It's really very good. It leads to a lot of other resources as well. Okay, so what are we talking about, right? There are basically three types of e-commerce websites. Okay, any company that has a website, right, as a way to, of course, connect with the wider world, has what is known as an information delivery site, okay? Now, this is most websites. Any B2B site, of course, has this as an element. But really, to move into e-commerce in a more significant way, you have two options, okay? You can do B2B e-marketplaces. Now, I think we're all familiar with those, I would hope, right? Whether it's Amazon.com, whether it's eBay, these third parties are these B2B e-marketplaces. And of course, now increasingly, companies that say we want to be able to sell direct to consumers in the US and perhaps internationally will build a transactional website, okay? This is an electronic storefront, and what it's set up for end-to-end transactions. All right. Now, when you're doing this, strongly recommend that when you're putting this together, you have a e-scan security assessment tool. You really want to look at what are some of the critical security issues around that website, whether it's protecting customer information, payment, you name it. It's really essential if you want to assess these critical security areas of your website and to build that online presence. A couple of tools out there are many, but Microsoft and Symantec both make e-scan security assessment tools. This should be a part of what you're doing when you're building that website for electronic commerce. All right. So now, it's companies that really want to aggressively market to the world, right? You really want to be seen. You want to be able to reach customers wherever they may be in various countries. Should maintain a website presence in the country, in the area, okay? And you'll find that that's a legal requirement in a number of places. I don't know if many of you are aware, but doing business in the EU, whether you're doing it through e-commerce or whether you're a traditional type of arrangement of sending product to a distributor who's then selling to end users, will require you to have a legal presence there. Now, that's often done through a law firm. So in this case, too, okay, you can use a register to have your domain name registered there. There are lawyers that do this. And the important thing about having your domain name registered is that this is going to really create a lot more visibility for your company in those markets. One of the other things that, of course, you want to take a look at carefully, as I mentioned, that e-commerce, our e-commerce resources will give you a lot of information about how to protect intellectual property abroad. Now, one of the key elements of that is also to register your website, not only in its maybe .com extension, right, but also .net, .org. You want to get the widest protection you can for it. Now, list of accredited registers will be a way that you can now register your website in these various international markets. So, I've given you some resources on that. And what you're going to find that another key part of the strategy here is to be able to register your website with multiple search engines. It should be noted, and we'll see this a little bit, in these next slides. Search engine usage is not the same around the world, right? Google is by far the big search engine presence in the US, right? They would have more of that market share than anyone else. But we'll take a look at what it looks like in Asia and in Europe. And a couple of things that, resources I put out here that I would draw your attention to. The Search Engine Colossus is just a great example of a site that will give you an idea of what search engines are used in various countries. What's the prevalence of those search engines around the world in particular countries? Is the site in English or in the native language? Here are a few other resources that you can use if you want to take a look at search engines around the world and the prevalence. And then here is what I was mentioning earlier. To give you an idea of what this looks like in Asia, right? You can see that Google and Yahoo have a very large market share, right? They are the most used search engines. But important to know, Baidu, right? Baidu is used a lot in China, okay? Alibaba, right? This is showing you the variation of search engines around the world. Well, if your website is not registered with these search engines, you may not have very good visibility in many of these markets. If we take a look at Europe, we'll see it's a little bit different. It's actually a lot different, right? Again, as I mentioned, Google is the dominant player there. But here are a number of other website search engines. Now, let me just, as one example, draw your attention to the green color, kind of the lime green color, Yandex. That is the largest search engine in Russia. So if your business is such that you're looking to do e-commerce, you're looking to do either business to business or business to consumer, well, your website should be registered with Yandu. You're not going to have much visibility or presence in Russia, okay? So again, showing you the degree to which e-commerce can really vary around the world and the different ways in which customers find you through search engines. So just to, not to do a deep dive into this, but how do search engines work? How do they find you, right? They're scouring the they're scouring the internet, they're indexing websites, and importantly, they're taking a look at features of your website, the meta tags and the link backs and the keyword frequency, right? So it's all about content, okay? This is really important to really, optimize your ranking to make sure that you're found, right? When people are conducting searches for your website, these are the types of things that are going to make a difference in how high you appear in that ranking. So some really key things to know. And I would suggest you engage a professional, okay? This is our website professional here. Hey, don't let it fool you. This guy does stand-up comedy on the weekends, so, Yeah. All right, so creating an international website, right, and you can appreciate this, right? It requires a knowledge of cultural, business, and technical knowledge, and we often recommend that a company have a globalized website because this serves as your primary global website. And the idea is that it's set up for localization, okay? It can be specifically set up to, appear in Chinese, to appear in Japanese, whatever. But importantly, it's going to address a number of concerns like metric, right? Are your specifications in metric? Do you have a currency converter? These are things that are, world-class, websites will have, those that are engaged in, business to business or business to consumer e-commerce. And finally, I want to mention something about payment mechanisms. I included the chimp. Actually, I got this photo from a colleague, but chimps are always funny. He's either going to give you that $10 or eat it. So, we'll see what happens here. And there's a lot to be said about payment mechanisms and the risk involved. I personally would not use credit cards. That's my take on it. But, with anything, there are never absolutes in life. There are a lot of qualifications here. There are many companies that are engaged in lots of transactions, right? Now, if you can afford to take a loss on a few transactions from time to time, hey, use credit cards. But I know many companies that cannot afford that. The average size of their sale is such that, they don't get paid a few times. It really starts to hurt financially. So, a couple of things that are not known about this is, first of all, they're not common in all countries. The types of credit cards in different countries vary a lot, and the chargebacks are a big issue. A lot of people do not realize that the cycle for chargebacks is a lot longer in e-commerce, and we've seen this happen a lot. You will take the hit on this if the rightful owner of that credit card can test that. 4 months later, you found out you had shipped a product to, I don't know, everybody always says Nigeria, so I'll say somewhere else, Indonesia, or somewhere where the product went, the person used the credit card, was using it illegally, and the credit card owner is in Chicago, okay? Well, I can tell you that those chargeback cycles can be long, and you'll get hit with that. We really recommend, my colleagues and I who counsel on this a lot, are person-to-person transfers, okay? PayPal, Google Checkout, Western Union, they're really a lot. They're really a much better way to go. I personally would do that. I would strongly encourage you to look at it. There are some limitations to it. PayPal has a $10,000 per transaction limit. And so when you start getting into situations where, let's say you're doing business to business, e-commerce, and the typical size of your sale may be $25,000, okay? Now you're getting into something that's going to be a little bit more complicated. Well, now we start to get into what are more traditional forms of payment in exporting, and wire transfers are used often. We have, of course, through the Export-Import Bank, export credit insurance. Any of you that are really out there selling an open account, strongly advise you look at export credit insurance. This is really a way to sell an open account and protect yourself against these losses. And of course, letters of credit are another common payment mechanism that's been around for a long time. So this is really, hitting it, skimming the surface, but really important issues around e-commerce. There's a lot more that can be said, but I would certainly encourage you to take a look at our e-commerce guide, that the link I've given you. You'll also find that on our website, export.gov, there's a lot more information about e-commerce. And through our e-commerce innovation lab, you'll see that we are doing webinars all the time in e-commerce. They're sometimes focused in a given region of the world or a given industry, but it will really enable you to learn a lot more. So I'm going to leave it at that in the interest of time, and thank you a lot for your attention.
All right, one final thank you to our speakers on behalf of our team. You have been most generous with your time and your mentorship and everything that you have done to help us lay out a successful export initiative in Clackamas County. So thank you to all three of you. And again, our thanks to you for joining us this morning and for your time and attention. I hope you walk away with some things that you can start to think about or implement immediately in your own organizations and businesses. And again, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email our team or call us. PowerPoints will be up on our website within the next week or so. With that, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.